Your sister deserves your boyfriend. She is more capable than you. Well, we'll see about that. I stood by the massive bay window, watching the sun melt into the horizon. My wine glass was half full, but my patience was entirely drained. The engagement party bustled behind me, clinking glasses, fake laughter, and hollow compliments. It was the kind of event my family adored, polished, pristine, and absolutely fraudulent. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration, but for me, it was a eulogy. I watched the golden light stretch over the rolling hills, wondering how the very people meant to love me unconditionally could orchestrate my downfall with such meticulous cruelty. I clenched my glass so tightly that the stem threatened to snap. But I didn't care. Let it shatter. Let them all shatter. Because tonight, I was done being the expendable one. It wasn't always this way. Growing up, my parents painted the perfect portrait of a happy family. On the surface, at least. My mother, Lydia, was all pearls and power suits, a woman who could manipulate you with a gentle smile and a sharpened tongue. My father, Charles, was quieter but equally ruthless. On Rachel's 16th birthday, they bought her a brand new silver Audi with a ribbon on top. When I turned 16, they handed me a set of keys to the family's old station wagon, scratched and sun-faded. My mother's only comment was, "Well, you'll probably just dent it anyway." Rachel was the kind of daughter they paraded around at charity galas, poised, elegant, flawless. I was the daughter they kept in the background, my eccentricity and inconvenience. When I started dating Liam, I thought I'd finally found someone who didn't care about my family's labels. He was kind, warm, and refreshingly genuine. He didn't care that I wasn't perfect. He loved that I wore scuffed sneakers instead of heels. That I doodled in the margins of menus, and that I dreamed of moving away and starting a life that was ours alone. For 3 years, he was my safe place. Until my parents turned him against me. The manipulation wasn't immediate. It was slow, deliberate, and expertly executed. At first, it was subtle, harmless dinner conversation designed to plant seeds of doubt. "Liam," my mother would say with her polished smile, her tone sweet as honey, "do you ever worry about Fiona's impulsiveness?" She would laugh lightly, as if it were a joke, but her eyes stayed sharp. "You're so stable. She's always been unpredictable. It must be exhausting keeping up with her whims." He would smile, brushing it off. At first. Then came the backhanded comments, always in front of him. "Fiona's so creative, but she never finishes anything," my father would say. "It's such a shame. She has such potential if only she were more disciplined." One night, when Liam left my apartment, my mother caught him in the driveway. She placed a gentle hand on his arm, her eyes glistening with feigned concern. "Liam, I worry about her," she said softly, her voice low and confidential. "She's always been a little unstable. You're so kind for putting up with it. I'm just afraid she'll hold you back." And Liam, being the good man he was, believed they were coming from a place of love. He didn't recognize their poison for what it was. Then they brought in Rachel. Rachel, with her graceful smiles and flawless charm, started popping up more often. Casual, accidental meetings, always orchestrated by my mother. "Oh, Fiona's working late tonight?" Rachel would say with mock surprise. "I was going to grab dinner alone. You should join me." I didn't think anything of it at first. Why would I? Rachel was my sister, and Liam was my boyfriend. I trusted them both. I didn't see the way she leaned just a little closer to him. The way her hand grazed his arm more often. The way she slowly inserted herself into his life, with my mother gently guiding the pieces into place. The night I discovered the truth was meant to be just another family dinner. One of those dreadful gatherings where everyone dressed too formally and smiled too brightly, and I spent the entire evening counting the minutes until I could leave. I was running late that night, stuck at work dealing with a client presentation that refused to cooperate. I had texted Liam, letting him know I'd meet him at the house. He had responded with a casual, "See you there." When I finally arrived, I was tired, irritated, and just hoping to get through the evening. But nothing could have prepared me for what I walked into. I remember stepping through the doorway and hearing the faint murmur of conversation from the dining room. My heels clicked softly against the marble floor as I walked down the hallway. I was about to call out to let them know I was there when I heard her laugh. Rachel's. The sound of it made my chest tighten, but I told myself it was nothing. I was being paranoid. But as I approached the archway, I heard Liam's voice, soft, low, and familiar in the most intimate way. "Don't worry," he murmured. "You look perfect." My stomach flipped. My steps faltered. I stepped into the doorway and saw them. Rachel was sitting beside Liam, her hand resting on his thigh like it belonged there. She was leaning in, smiling up at him with that coy, perfect expression she had mastered. Liam, my Liam, turned to her and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender, practiced, familiar. Too familiar. I froze. For a moment. I thought maybe, just maybe, I was imagining it. I waited for Liam to flinch, to pull back, to glance around the room guiltily. But he didn't. My mother, who was sitting across from them, caught my eye. She didn't look surprised or guilty. She simply gave me a small, satisfied smile and turned back to her wine glass. She knew. She had orchestrated this. Rachel finally noticed me. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She just smiled, smug, triumphant. "Hey, Fi," she said sweetly, her eyes glinting. "You're late." The casualness of her voice, the sheer audacity of it, made my vision blur with fury. I turned to Liam, my voice barely above a whisper. "What the hell is this?" His face paled. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Rachel's smile widened as she took his hand in hers. She rubbed slow, lazy circles into his skin, possessive, deliberate. My mother took a long sip of her wine, watching me carefully. My father barely glanced up from his plate. They were all in on it. All of them. I don't remember walking out. I don't remember getting into my car. All I remember is driving away, fast, reckless, my knuckles white against the steering wheel, until I was too far to see their mansion behind me. Even after all of this, they had the audacity to invite me at their engagement party. My mom also commented over the invite call, "I knew you would understand." I didn't say anything then, but at the engagement party, they were going to pay. I didn't rush my revenge. I crafted it, slowly, meticulously, layer by layer, like my mother had once built her perfect image. I knew that if I struck too quickly, they'd recover. They'd sweep it all under the rug, spin it into another one of their pristine lies, but if I hit them slowly and deliberately, if I made them bleed bit by bit, there would be no rug big enough to cover the damage. I started with Rachel, my perfect, flawless sister had spent years crafting her image. The golden child. The social darling. The one whose Instagram was filled with photos of charity galas, weekends at exclusive resorts, and soft-lit pictures of her and Liam looking like the poster children for a designer fragrance campaign. But what people didn't see was the dirt I had on her. In college, Rachel had once been arrested for shoplifting, just once, but my parents had paid off the store owner to keep it out of the papers. The footage had been erased, and the record sealed. Or so they thought. I made a few calls. A little cash in the right hands, and suddenly, I had the surveillance footage. Crisp, clear images of Rachel slipping a pair of diamond earrings into her purse with the practiced ease of a career criminal. I didn't release it right away. No, I waited. I created dummy accounts on social media, anonymous profiles. And slowly, I leaked pieces of it. A blurry still frame here. A grainy image there. Enough to pique curiosity, the rumors began quietly, people wondering if the photos were real. Rachel brushed it off at first, until the video leaked in full. There she was, crystal clear, shoving jewelry into her purse while glancing over her shoulder. The footage went viral overnight. News outlets jumped on it. Heiress caught in shoplifting scandal. Rachel's flawless image crumbled, brands she had modeled for pulled their contracts. Charity organizations she once smiled for severed their ties. Her face was smeared across gossip sites. Her sponsors vanished overnight, but that was only the beginning. Liam was trickier. He didn't have skeletons in his closet the way Rachel did. But he had regrets. I had something he didn't know existed, the letter he had written me after he left, a pathetic, guilt-ridden confession. In it, he detailed everything. How my parents had manipulated him, how my mother had planted doubts in his head, how Rachel had been the perfect alternative, the easier choice. He admitted he didn't love Rachel, not really. She was just a safer bet, the one who fit into their world. I made a copy of the letter and slipped it into Rachel's purse. I knew she'd find it. She always snooped, and when she did, she went ballistic. At first, Rachel thought Liam had been planning to leave her. She confronted him at a public event, a swanky charity auction, her voice loud, shrill, unhinged. Was she better in bed than me? She screamed, her voice carrying through the ballroom. People stared. Cameras flashed. Rachel, once so poised, was suddenly a screaming, trembling wreck. Liam tried to calm her, but she slapped him across the face in front of everyone. The next morning, their fight was on the front page of every gossip rag in the city. Golden couple's ugly public meltdown. Liam's reputation as the polished, charming entrepreneur was ruined. The clients he once wooed with his winning smile started pulling their deals. No one wanted their name associated with a man whose personal life was splashed across tabloid headlines. He became a pariah, shunned from the very circles my family once worshipped. But the piece de resistance came at the engagement party. Because I wasn't done yet, the room was a sea of polished smiles and glittering gowns, the epitome of wealth and pretense. The chandeliers cast a golden glow over the clinking champagne flutes and fake laughter. But as I stood in the center of it all, I was done pretending. My fingers curled around the letter in my pocket, the paper slightly crumpled from my grip. My heart pounded in my chest, but my voice was steady as I clinked my glass with my fork, the sharp ring slicing through the noise. May I have your attention? I called out sweetly, my voice loud enough to silence the room. The crowd turned toward me, smiling faces frozen mid-laugh. Glasses halfway to their lips. I met my parents' eyes immediately. My mother's face, elegant and poised, twitched almost imperceptibly. She sensed it. She knew I was about to ruin them. My father, ever the stoic businessman, narrowed his eyes slightly, warning me in that subtle, commanding way he always did. It didn't work this time. I walked slowly toward the front of the room, heels tapping softly against the marble floor, drawing out the silence. My fingers trembled slightly, but I held the letter tighter, feeding off the electric charge of rage building in my chest. First, I want to say how thrilled I am for my sister and my ex-boyfriend, I began, smiling tightly. My voice was calm, too calm, and that made my mother's posture stiffen. She recognized the venom beneath it. The room grew still. Rachel's smile faltered, and Liam shifted uncomfortably. My parents' eyes narrowed slightly, sensing the storm building beneath my words. I turned to the crowd, addressing them directly. You know, I've always admired my parents, I said slowly, deliberately. They are masters of appearances. They've spent their entire lives curating perfection, the perfect family, the perfect image, the perfect lies. Whispers spread through the crowd. My mother's eyes darkened as she realized where I was going. I turned toward Liam and Rachel, holding the letter in my hand. But tonight isn't about them. It's about these two lovebirds, I said, my voice dripping with false sweetness. And the pure, genuine love they've built. I mean, from the moment they started sleeping together behind my back, it was obvious they were meant to be. Gasps rippled through the room. Rachel's face went ghost pale. Liam stiffened. My father's knuckles whitened around his glass. My mother's lips parted slightly, ever the composed hostess. she masked her shock with a shaky sip of wine. But I could see the faint tremor in her hand. I slowly unfolded the letter and held it up for the room to see, my voice sharp and clear. But this isn't just about them, I said, my eyes locking on my parents. It's about you too. I turned to them, feeling the adrenaline burn through me like fire. You coached him, didn't you? My voice hardened. You planted doubts in his head. You convinced him I was unstable. Too impulsive. Not good enough. You made sure he saw me as a burden. I stepped closer, my eyes narrowing. And when that wasn't enough, you gave him a better option. Rachel. Your perfect, golden child. You paraded her in front of him like a shiny new car, sleek, polished, and easier to drive. A sharp gasp echoed from someone in the crowd. The mask my parents wore cracked, finally. My mother's eyes flared with fury, and she took a step forward, her voice low and venomous. Fiona, she hissed. That's enough. But I didn't stop. I stepped toward her, voice unwavering. No, it's not. It's never enough with you, is it? You always had to polish Rachel's crown and grind me into dust beneath her heel. You dismissed me, mocked me, and treated me like an inconvenience. Like I was nothing. My voice rose, ringing through the crowd. Well, I am done being nothing. I turned back to the crowd, my voice cold and clear. These are the people you admire, the perfect parents, the devoted family. They manipulated a man into breaking my heart because they wanted him for their better daughter. I gestured to Rachel, whose face was blotched with anger and shame, her mascara smudging as she stared daggers at me. They destroyed their own child because they couldn't stand to see me happy. I stepped back slightly, my breath ragged but steady. The room was dead silent. Guests stared at my parents with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. Some muttered under their breath, others shook their heads and turned away. My mother's face was a mask of fury, her eyes sharp with contained rage. But there was nothing she could do. I had already won. My father's face hardened, his lips pressed into a thin line, but his eyes flickered with something I had never seen before: shame. The man who had once regarded me as insignificant was now exposed in front of everyone he sought to impress, and that was when I knew I had truly destroyed them. The morning after the party, the mansion that had once been my family's crown jewel felt more like a crumbling tomb. The glittering chandeliers and gilded decor could no longer mask the rotting foundation of the people who had once ruled it. I didn't stay to witness the fallout firsthand. I walked out that night with my head held high and never looked back. But I knew the damage I'd inflicted was irreversible. Rachel had always been untouchable, the perfect daughter, the flawless socialite. Her entire identity was built on polish and perfection. But in the days that followed, the cracks I had driven through her perfect image splintered wide open. By the next morning, the engagement party disaster was all over social media. Clips from the event, recorded by scandal-hungry guests, went viral. The most damning moment, the one where Rachel slapped Liam and called him a pathetic coward in front of everyone, circulated relentlessly. The tabloids devoured it, splashing headlines like, "Fire Golden Girls Meltdown, Rachel Emerson's engagement party ends in public humiliation." Collision from perfect heiress to spoiled villain, Rachel's downfall caught on camera. Her once adored socialite image was shredded. Her modeling contracts, already shaky after the shoplifting scandal I had revealed, vanished overnight. Brands she once represented cut ties. Wanting nothing to do with the woman who had been exposed as both a liar and a homewrecker, worse still, the video of her public breakdown sparked open ridicule. On social media, she became a meme, the screeching sister, her face contorted in fury, slapped across GIFs and TikToks with mocking captions. Even her closest friends distanced themselves. No one wanted to be associated with her wreckage. The same social circles that once worshipped her turned cold. I heard whispers that she stopped leaving the house, unable to face the humiliation, but the true blow came when Liam left her. Liam had never been strong, not really. My parents' manipulation had always preyed on his insecurity, his need for validation. They had made him believe he needed Rachel, the safer, shinier, more appropriate option, but once I exposed them at the party, Rachel's perfect facade crumbled in front of his eyes. And when she found the letter, the one where Liam had admitted he never truly loved her, she turned on him with the same venom she once reserved for me. In the days that followed, they fought constantly. Guests from the party leaked stories of their screaming matches. Witnesses spotted Rachel throwing drinks at him during a public argument at a cafe. She tore into him for lying, for choosing her out of convenience instead of love. She humiliated him, and he took it, at first, but Liam couldn't withstand the onslaught of public scorn. His polished image as a successful entrepreneur was shattered. The gossip columns portrayed him as weak, a man who had destroyed a woman's life only to be destroyed by her sister in return. His business partners severed ties. Investors pulled out of projects. Clients ghosted him. His company, a once thriving startup, collapsed within weeks. Eventually, he fled the city. I heard he tried to start over somewhere quiet, but he was broken, a shadow of the man he once was. But it was my parents' destruction that brought me the most satisfaction. For decades, they had built their reputation on power and influence. My father's business was built on trust, on connections he had cultivated through years of backroom deals and handshakes over whiskey glasses. My mother had maintained their social standing with calculated charm and perfect smiles, but when I exposed them as heartless manipulators, people who had betrayed their own daughter in pursuit of appearances, their power evaporated overnight. The guests at the party talked. And they didn't stop. Word spread quickly, especially to my father's business partners. No one wanted to be associated with a man who was publicly outed as a conniving liar who destroyed his own child's relationship. Within a month, his biggest clients pulled their contracts. His name, once a symbol of stability, became poison in the industry. Board members called for his removal, citing the company's plummeting public image. He fought to hold on, but he was pushed out, disgraced and bitter. Meanwhile, my mother's social ring crumbled. Her friends, the ones who once clung to her for status and favors, turned their backs. She was no longer the woman they wanted to be seen with. Her name became synonymous with cruelty. Her social invitations dried up. Her charity boards removed her name. No one trusted them anymore. They were shunned from the very society they had worshipped. My parents, once the envy of everyone they knew, became pariahs. The last time I saw them was at a lawyer's office. They had called me, begging to meet. I almost didn't go, but some dark, petty part of me wanted to see them beg. When I walked into the office, I barely recognized them. My mother, once so elegant, so perfectly manicured, looked hollowed out, her face pale and lined with stress. Her hair was unkempt, her once sharp eyes dull and tired. My father sat beside her, his broad shoulders hunched under the weight of his failure. His suit was still expensive, but he no longer filled it with confidence. They looked like shadows of the people they once were. My mother's hands trembled slightly as she reached across the table. "Fiona," she said softly, her voice cracking. We wanted to talk. We wanted to." She trailed off, her eyes filling with unshed tears. I waited, staring at her empty attempt at remorse. And then, slowly, I shook my head. "No," I said coldly. "You don't get to ask for forgiveness. Not after everything." Her lips parted, but no words came. My father's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak either. For once, he had no control. I stood, turning toward the door. Before I left, I glanced over my shoulder, my voice low but steady. "You can spend the rest of your lives choking on your regrets. But I'll never look back." And then I walked out of their lives forever. In the months that followed, I rebuilt myself. I moved away, far from the ruins of my old life. I started fresh, cutting every tie to my family, and for the first time, I was free from my mother's sneers, my father's condescension, and my sister's shadow. Free from Liam's cowardice. Free from their lies and betrayals. I built a new life, a life they could never touch, and I never looked back.